Hi, everyone. We're here to talk about my favorite subject these days, VMware to OpenStack migration and choices in open source virtualization. I'm pleased to welcome my guests. I'll let you guys introduce yourselves.
Thank you so much. I'm DJ, CEO and founder of Gconverter. The Gconverter is a known migration company.
Hi, my name is Ken Crandall. I am a product manager at Rackspace, one of the originators of OpenStack.
So, I want to get started on this panel. I still feel a little weird standing here while they're sitting there, but there it is. Is there anybody in the room that doesn't know about the Broadcom acquisition of VMware? Okay, good. That makes life much easier. As everyone knows, this has created sort of an avalanche in the world of virtualization. VMware had a 40% market share until very recently. We are expecting that to continue to decline, which seems to be what Broadcom wants. They seem to only want a handful of customers that are paying them lots and lots and lots of money. We know also that there are other choices out there like Nutanix. We'll get into some of that, but they present their own sort of problems with vendor lock-in, very similar to what you see with VMware. So I'd like to start out with some questions around what you all are seeing in the market, what you're seeing with your customers, and we can go from there. So I think I'd like to kick off with what kind of misconceptions do you see that organizations imagine about migrating their workloads off of VMware and onto something like OpenStack, which is a whole new scary universe for a lot of them? Ken?
Sure, I'll take a start at this. I would say the two biggest ones I would start with, one is that it's an all or nothing game, that you have to migrate your entire set of workloads from VMware to OpenStack. Just like any set of platforms, there's always going to be workloads that are idealized for one or the other platform. And I think that it's kind of, as if you saw my talk yesterday, you would have noticed that even if you do a partial migration, there's definitely a way to get some savings from that. And there's definitely a way to, I think, identify the workloads that would benefit most from running on top of OpenStack versus VMware. And I would say the second one is around the costs of migrating. We've all seen that number thrown out. I think you're going to get to it later, so
Go ahead. This is for free form.
Someone threw out a number that said something like $5,000 per VM to migrate. A little bit of math I did on that. If I did one VM a day, and took nights and weekends off, that would be like $1.3 million a year to pay someone to do that. Now, most of us know that, especially with tools like Zconverter and others, you can kind of move VMs en masse. So that not only doesn't make sense from just a timing perspective, but a cost perspective, that number is just straight out the window. So I think it's really less expensive in terms of the actual migration. I think as a part of that, just understanding the workloads you're migrating, there's quite a few workloads that might not even need to be migrated. You might be able to just redeploy them or reinstall them or use your DR facilities to reinstantiate them in OpenStack, and that can be a lot quicker and safer way to move over those workloads.
As a Gconverter is migration companies, there are two different misunderstandings. Two different types of misunderstandings. Actually, the first one is we cannot do, but they think we can do. And the other one is like we can do, but they don't believe we can. Actually, let me talk about the we can not do, but they think we can do. Actually, they think a virtual machine can be automatically migrated to containers. That we cannot do this. And also, they believing that like the Windows Server can be automatically converted to Linux. We cannot do this.
That would be hard.
Many companies ask us about this. Yeah. And assuming like EOS Windows Server end of service, that can be automatically migrated to or upgraded to the latest version of Windows Server, we cannot do. And the other is that we can do, but they don't believe we cannot, and we can. And actually, there are still many VMware, the virtual machine, running on 32-bit BIOS. But the OpenStack is implemented in a 64-bit UEFI. They don't believe a Z converter can migrate the workload between the BIOS and UEFI, but you can do it. The second one is like they don't think the disk resizing is impossible. It's possible, but the Z converter can increase or decrease the disk size during the migration from VMware to OpenStack.
Yeah, so, oh, sorry.
Yeah.
No, go ahead.
And another one is like they don't believe that storage migration, such as VMware's RDM and vVols or LVM, like it's possible, but they can migrate the RDM and the vVols or LVM, just like block storage migrations.
Yeah, so I want to touch on one of the things you just brought up, DJ, which is that in a lot of cases, we've got customers running VMware on old and outdated hardware. So it's not only an opportunity for companies like Rackspace or companies like zConverter to help these folks move on to a new, more modern workload, but it's also an opportunity for them to upgrade their data center and in a lot of cases decrease their footprint and decrease the amount they're spending. I'd love to hear from both of you on sort of what you're seeing in the market and along those lines. Ken?
Sure. I would say there's to address that, I'll address that in reverse order. One is in terms of being able to consolidate footprint. The huge growth in CPU core count and RAM capacity of machines really has driven up the ability to consolidate and have density. And really, one of the things that we've noticed is a lot of customers who've deployed VMware and have been deploying it for a long time have large tranches of hosts that are older technology. Right. So not only do you have that massive consolidation, from fewer core counts to higher core counts and less RAM to more RAM, but also a lot of that hardware was purchased to try and optimize against the way VMware intended people to license it. So people were always trying to find that knee in the curve of, okay, where's the optimal core count for me to have in this box where I can keep it the same licensing level I am for VMware, or what's the amount of RAM? And every time there was a licensing switch, everyone got kind of caught and had to rejigger it. But basically, because of the way OpenStack tends to be supported, I can speak, authoritatively about how we do it at Rackspace, which is per host. And a hypervisor host is a hypervisor host. Doesn't matter if you're talking a 2-socket box with 1 billion cores and terabytes of RAM, or a really small box. So you're actually rewarded for consolidating from a support cost perspective, and also because there's no licensing cost to really have to focus on. How dense you want to go is more of a case of how dense your data center can support, in terms of power and cooling, or how much you actually want to spend on hardware, and where the ideal place for you is.
DJ, thoughts? What are your customers seeing?
He already said everything I need to say. Yeah, actually.
Well done, Ken. Okay, well, let's talk about, let's move on. I mentioned, well, actually, I want to talk about, migration time. This is a big concern. I know in talking to both of you that in a lot of cases, people come at this thinking they have to move everything over all at once. And in practicality, that's not actually what's happening in the market. I think a lot of people are taking baby steps. Some can't afford to do that because they have to immediately get out of their contract. But I'd like to talk about sort of what you're seeing for not just average migration time, but also what's the difference between a SMB versus an enterprise type company, and how are they kind of handling that?
It's it depends on the type of migrations, like lift and shift migrations and the containerizations. Like the many SMBs choose a lift and shift migrations. That they save a lot of time and the cost to convert the VMware virtual machine to like an OpenStack virtual machine. However, due to the vendor lock-in issues or like a price hike issue, some enterprises consider migrating the VMware the virtual machine to containers. If they decide, actually, they already said with this, they might need to pay for like over the several thousands per virtual machine, and also spend a lot of time. Well, actually, why they need to make a containerization is like a vendor lock-in or move in, move out the capability. I recommend migrating the VMware virtual machine to OpenStack virtual machine the first to save time and money. And also, if needed, as a second step, they can do the like containerization project. But the 4 months ago, the Z converter, the launched OpenStack Z task force team to like empower OpenStack's move in, move out capability of a virtual machine across different hypervisors or different cloud platforms. Yeah, they don't need to be locked in once we announce the official OpenStack Z project.
Yeah, I would agree with all of that and just add a couple of, I guess, little extra bits to that. One part would be that the primary thing is you know, the big thing that's driving people to get off of VMware right now is cost, right? There's a lot of people in general weren't unhappy technologically, but there's always a certain point where like it's not worth it, and Broadcom kind of crossed that line with a lot of folks, and so we found that the speed at which to migrate is really driven by the will behind the person doing it, and like I literally have gone to meetings where you know, a C-level executive from a customer said like Broadcom pissed them off and I don't want to give them another dollar, and that becomes I'm like, okay, great, you can give them all to me, but with that comes like, so there's a high degree of motivation, and like he said, the first thing to do is okay, focus on platform migration, focus on the most expedient way to do that, because if it gets muddled with a you know, containerization or app modernization effort, you're now adding steps into the process that aren't literally focused on transferring from one platform to the other. You're actually rewriting your software as a part of that. And I would say that's also kind of what tends to happen at the enterprise level is things get caught up in giant sweeping arcs of enterprise strategy. And really where it becomes, it's really when it's a focused, you know, very clear set of goals, which is change from one platform to the other, do it within a certain time period. And that can be accelerated by, you know, the number of people you put in place to parallelize it, you know, the tooling that you choose. And ultimately the thing that then drives velocity is physics, right? Because if you've got large VMs and you're, you know, pulling large virtual disks off, you're constrained by how fast your networking is and how fast you can pull that out of, you know, a data store in VMware, convert it and stick it into a Cinder volume. So really, you know, I would say if you can get your organizational inertia out of the way and commit, and then identify, you know, the best process for each individual workload, whether it's to lift and shift, whether it's to redeploy, whether it's to, you know, restore from backup, however, then really the velocity then comes to, you know, how much you want to parallelize and you know, how fast your environment is.
Okay. So another thing I want to touch on, I've heard word on the street is VMware and also Nutanix are raising prices again, and soon. So, you know, Ken, you mentioned the $5,000 per VM kind of FUD that's been put out there. I think we all know that it's less than that. But talk to me about cost in general, and also, you know, why you would avoid moving over to something like Nutanix from VMware, and why choose an open source solution, and further, if you can throw in a customer success story, either of you, that would be fantastic.
Well, I can talk about a use case. I can't mention customers because in our case, being both a VMware shop as well as an OpenStack shop, we have definite, want to make sure that we're definitely not throwing anyone under the bus, whether it's a partner or a customer. But one thing I can talk to is really the important part of all that is that we have to, the costs are really driven in the, you know, the costs that are really driven are really, software licensing is such a huge part of your IT budget, right? And we all talk about open source in terms of a development model, a community, but and various vendors have encapsulated how they support open source in very different ways, whether it's subscription, whether it's a support cost. And I think really you have to break it all down. You have to break down what support you need and what you're getting, what the software licensing cost is. Like I said, the way Rackspace delivers it is we deliver a per host support model, and there is no licensing charge. So that becomes a huge cost differentiator before you even break it down into apples and oranges of sockets per year versus hosts per year or whatever. But ultimately, one of the things that open source is about is freedom. It's about the ability to own your own destiny. And one of the reasons that we at Rackspace deploy upstream OpenStack without, you know, any secret sauce is because we always offer our customers the ability to transfer their operation of their infrastructure back to themselves. There's always that off-ramp. And that off-ramp means that we don't have any kind of hook that requires them to do business with us. We make ourselves a good partner that they want to do business with us. We have to earn their business every day. And I think that's a big differentiator for most open source companies who really get it, is you do have to earn the trust and the business of your customers all the time. And that model is very, very different. And so what kind of a value do you place on that? So when you're talking to leaders, you know, whether it's C-level executives or even VPs, depending on how big the organization, where that falls, I really try and talk to them like how much value, how much of a price tag do you put on the ability to control your own destiny? Because if I were a C-level executive and I were being told by my board that VMware is too expensive and I need to go figure stuff out, regardless of whether I want to, if that's my marching orders, if I just did something like Nutanix, which while it may be a perfectly adequate and great technical solution and an ideal replacement from the standpoint of apples to apples, I'm really just trading one problem for the same problem that's going to come at some other time. I haven't increased my level of freedom. I haven't, you know, I don't have the ability to own my own destiny. I've just traded masters. So I think I would be very disappointed if, you know, Nutanix keeps raising prices, even if it's always 10% cheaper than VMware. I don't want to be going back to my board and having them, you know, 10 years from now saying, why didn't you solve this problem? You know, why did you just kick this can down the road and have this problem happen again?
DJ, thoughts?
As you told, like Nutanix price is increased, they changed their price. Actually, as long as I know, their price is 20% cheaper than VMware, 10%, right?
Some number.
That's not a big deal, right? Recently, I had a chance to talk with the VMware IT manager who worked for conglomerate, like is involved into manufacturing and the telecom. Actually, one of the manufacturing company, the first plan is to migrate their AWS workload, not the VMware cases, to Nutanix due to the high subscription cost. Actually, they are paying $5 million annually. And they received some quote professional services with Nutanix. Actually, they offered like $20 million, including the professional services. There might be like containerization services, and plus like 10% cheaper Nutanix product, right? Due to that, the company is the stop or considering to keeping using the AWS. The other case is telco companies. They successfully completed the POC to a VMware alternative, but the same region, that solution is increased price suddenly. Due to this, that customers that are considering the migrating their workload to like the public cloud services such as AWS or Google Cloud. Due to the like sudden price hikes, they are hesitating to move to VMware like a top two alternative such as like Nutanix. But due to this, I recommend the migrating the VMware virtual machine to OpenStack, pure OpenStack virtual machine first to save time and money. And then, as a second step, they can do any containerizations. If the purpose of the containerization is like the avoiding the vendor lock-in issue or certain price issues, they don't need to do that. They just move their VMware virtual machine to pure OpenStack like a Rackspace or OpenMetal. And then they might need to do containerization later. They can move out to any hypervisor, any cloud platform if necessary.
All right, so we've got about 4 minutes left. I have so many things I could ask, but I want to focus on what this looks like. I think everybody looking at the situation in the coming years sees that this thing has a pretty long tail. I think there's a lot of opportunity out there. You know, what do you all see coming down the road over the next 3 to 5 years with this stuff?
Well, I can say I think, you know, there was some miscalculations by, you know, obviously by Broadcom and by others for understanding the reasons why people stayed on-prem. You know, for a lot of people, they're like, oh, well, these workloads weren't cloudy, or these workloads, you know, didn't lend themselves to going in public cloud, or, you know, for whatever reason. But as we've talked to more and more customers, we've learned that there are very specific reasons why they're not deploying in a public cloud type environment. So, you know, whether it's, you know, data sovereignty, whether it's data gravity, whether it's control, whether it's, you know, IP, you know, there's all sorts of reasons that have kept people in the data center. And so I think that the misconception was that these workloads weren't ready for cloud. And you know, so from the Broadcom side, the misperception was I've got these people, you know, where I want them, and I can raise my prices, and they have no choice. And really, what we found is for a lot of these customers is, like I said, the reasons they stayed where weren't that these workloads could not be moved to a cloud solution like OpenStack. It was because they had been deployed on VMware. That was fine, and they were just there was no point to change. But now that there's a compelling reason to change, that modernization, whether it's containerization or whether it's making your app more cloud native, or, you know, and adopting a platform like OpenStack that is a cloud platform, right? It's API driven, it's, you know, it's programmable infrastructure, and has all those same benefits, but you have the ability to run that in your own data center, you know. So I think, again, you know, it's forcing another thinking cycle for those executives to say,
right.
why am I choosing the technologies that I am? And their business reasons might not have changed, but now their choices might be different because, you know, the cost structure is now completely different.
Yeah, no, and I love the fact that you're kind of educating them on what a modern workload looks like as you're moving them over as well. DJ, thoughts on that?
Due to the recent price changes, from the major players such as VMware, Nutanix, I think the virtualization's market in the next 3 to 5 could increase by over 500%. Yeah, actually, in addition, there will be the 4 major players in the market, like a VMware and Red Hat, Nutanix, and the pure OpenStack players such as Rackspace. Still like a VMware's their market share could be like a 40%. They increase the price 5 or 6 times, right? And Nutanix and Red Hat market shares could be like 25%. They increase like 80 or 90% of VMware's price. And pure OpenStack's market share could be like 25%. Assuming by this like a market share, like a total virtualization market size could be like over 500% compared to the last year. And in addition, all 4 players, the revenue and the profit could increase by over the 200%, I think.
All right. So lots of opportunity out there. I have to what? Oh, well, that's exciting. Then I have more questions. Cool. So this is actually, I'm glad I actually get to cover this because I think one of the powerful things that everybody that works on OpenStack knows is that we have this awesome ecosystem that is built on top of OpenStack and built alongside of it. But it's scary for people that are moving from VMware because they don't have the same tools that they used to have. And I know one of the things I've talked to both Ken and DJ about is really helping these companies evaluate why have they made the decisions that they've made? Do they use all the tools that they currently have in VMware, and what would it look like to modernize that? So how do you kind of coax these folks into working with other ecosystem partners that are more OpenStack friendly and that kind of work alongside the tools that you offer?
Well, I'd say that the primary thing is focusing, this is why I said like yesterday at my talk that I don't like to get into feature by feature discussions because while OpenStack stacks up, so to speak, very well against VMware, mostly what I try to talk to customers about is what are you trying to do? Like, what are your goals? What are your business goals? Even forget about technology for a second. What are your business goals? And then how do you currently achieve those business goals using the platform you have? And then if we can break it down into what they're trying to do, whether it could be something broad, like I need high availability, I need multi-site business continuity, I need a disaster recovery plan, process, I need data protection. There's all these big kind of, all the buzzwords here. There's these big business, initiatives that companies have because they want to keep the lights on. And how you do that really should not be, as long as you're achieving that goal and as long as you're achieving that goal using the proper set of tooling, there's always an opportunity for companies to retool. This happens all the time. It's nothing new. We did this through Unix to Linux migrations 25 years ago. And there's always going to be a certain subset of people who have their blinders on and say, this is what I know. And how does it compare with what I know? And usually, once you get them to think a little higher level in terms of what is it you're trying to do versus how does it, I push this button here on this page to have this thing happen. If you can kind of break of that, very turn the crank, mechanical thinking and get more focused on the process thinking, most of the time it's not as different as it might seem. A lot of times you're dealing with language differences, right? People say, well, I need vMotion. I said, well, we have live migration. It's the same thing. They said, I need storage vMotion. We have Cinder volume migration. VMware HA, Masakare, and there's all sorts of those, but really what do you need? I need instance high availability. I need live migration of instances from one hypervisor to another. I need to be able to migrate storage from one backend to another. Once you break it down into what you want to do and why you need to do it, there's usually a way to do it. It may not be an exact identical way, but there's usually a way to accomplish that goal, and sometimes there's an OpenStack way and there's a VMware way. So long story short, I'd say the biggest thing is just trying to build up people's confidence, and it's not necessarily through it's not limited to just training or exposing them to new tooling, but to get them to think more about how they're trying to accomplish their goals and showing them. And that's part of why there's such a rich ecosystem of OpenStack providers. We have that expertise, and part of our goal is to, hey, we're here to do this with you, and we're going to share our expertise, and we're going to help get you on board. And we own this process of helping you evolve from running on on VMware to running on OpenStack as much as you do. And I think if you are good at convincing them that you're in it as a partner, and that you're going to help them get to that point, and that you're not, and again, if you're earning their business every day, like I said earlier, by being that good partner, then they realize that they're not going about this alone. They don't have to have necessarily all the answers from day one, but they know that you'll get them to a point where they'll be just as functional. The same way they did when they went from bare metal to consolidation to virtualization. They went from Unix to Linux 20 years ago. So this is just sort of like the life cycle of IT in a lot of ways.
I agree with him. As you know well, the already mentions like the 20 or 25 years ago, most like IT was they are using a physical machine. Now we are saying the bare metal machines. And most of the bare metal machines migrated to the VMware's virtual machine using the lift and shift migration technology 20 years ago. And I cannot understand why there is some argument about the lift and shift migration from VMware to OpenStack. Actually, the excluding like the vendor lock-in issue or like a price hike issue, they just do the migrate their VMware virtual machine to OpenStack, like a pure OpenStack, such as Rackspace virtual machine. That's it. And our OpenStack Z project, though, empower the OpenStack to move in and move out the capabilities across any hypervisors, any cloud platforms. Actually, the Z Converter is a 20 years old migration company. We supported many enterprises, such as Samsung and the global companies. Actually, my recommendation is to do the migration first to OpenStack, then consider containerization or stay in OpenStack, some virtual machine. That's it.
So, Ken, you brought up something that I think is interesting, and as did DJ, that when you're moving, you have all of these valuable employees that you've worked with. You don't want to leave them high and dry, right? You want to bring them along for the journey, and convincing them, folks that maybe haven't looked at OpenStack for a very long time, they think it's too complicated. They think that OpenStack is dead. All the things that we've all heard over the years, when in reality, per DJ's point, there are migration tools like Z Converter to help make this change. But what is the industry doing to help educate these folks and help bring these VMware button clickers, I guess, over to train them on OpenStack?
Well, I would, as you mentioned earlier, when you look at migrating from bare metal to virtualization, that was a lot bigger change for the industry, right? We had people who managed compute. We had people who we had DBAs managing databases. We had network groups managing networks, and we had storage admins managing storage, and they were all silos, right? And one of the big kind of things that we learned is during that consolidation of physical bare metal into virtualized platforms, it broke down a lot of those silos. All of a sudden, you had folks who now we're multidisciplined. They had to understand networking, they had to understand storage, they had to understand, in some cases, databases, and so forth. And so moving from VMware to OpenStack is actually a lot less complicated than that. It's like learning one database versus another, or learning one tool versus another. Yeah, there's some daunting aspects of it. It's most, like I said earlier, a terminology issue. But that same terminology issue arises if you're moving to Nutanix, right? Like moving platforms is just moving platforms, and you're not actually switching technologies, if you will. You're still moving from one virtualization platform to another virtualization platform. Now, I'd argue that OpenStack has many more things to offer than just virtualization, but that's kind of a different discussion. But even so, you know, people fear change, right? And that's fundamentally what they're being put into a position of change somewhat unwillingly by this price hike in a lot of cases, and so they're naturally going to dig their feet in and fight against that. And so I think the biggest thing you can show them is, look, you know, it's not that different. You know, once you famously, one of my peers got asked once, you know, told once a piece of FUD that someone knew that OpenStack didn't have a UI, and he's like, we actually have two. And I think, you know, like or people had seen, you know, or most people had only looked at OpenStack, say, 10 years ago. And I was actually walking one of our, you know, a potential customer through the Skyline UI that we shipped today, and he was shocked at how not only modern it looked, but how kind of familiar a lot of the concept looked. And I think, again, people built it in their head this was very difficult, but I think also going back, you know, 15 years when OpenStack was starting, we were having to teach people about cloud concepts as well as OpenStack proper. So again, that was a technology shift. This is more just a tooling shift, and that's just, you know, getting past those nomenclature issues and you know, helping them build the confidence. And again, building that trust and that good relationship as being a trusted partner is a big part of that.
DJ?
And I think the VMware technology did great things for IT industries for the last 20 or 25 years. And now the VMware technology is relatively the legacy technology compared to OpenStack technology. OpenStack platform is like the latest modernized cloud technologies, such as AWS. I told you, well, 4 months ago, the Z converter, the launched like task first team, OpenStack Z. Due to that, I studied like OpenStack technology for 4 months. And I identified OpenStack's architecture and technology and the features are over 90% similar to like AWS and Google Cloud and like Oracle Cloud. This means like these days, many IT guys already learned AWS and Google Cloud or Oracle Cloud and how to, they are like expertise. Because of this, I don't think it is not that difficult for them to use and study like OpenStack technology. We just need to let them know, you already know almost like 80–90% of OpenStack technology if you already used like AWS or Google Cloud or Oracle Cloud.
Yeah, so first I'd like to note that DJ studied OpenStack for 4 months and then built his own distribution, and I've worked at the foundation for 10 years and I still don't really know how OpenStack works exactly. So, well done, sir. Do we want to take questions from the audience? Yes?
So when you are migrating virtual machines from let's say VMware to OpenStack, is there a downtime involved?
Okay, so to repeat the question for the camera, when you're migrating from VMware to OpenStack, is there downtime?
That's my first question. And I have a second question. In a VMware world, you have features like the site recovery manager. My only question is there a kind of a replication software natively which does a proper change data capture for a KVM hypervisor? And there are, customers or there are users who say that, hey, I'm not going to cloud native. My application is designed to be monolith, and it will be monolith at least for the next 5 years. So, same like how mainframe has prevailed, I think virtualization will prevail. So, that's my comment, but I have just these two questions.
The second question was too long for me to sum up, so I'll let you guys
I would say, you know, we've evaluated several sets of tools, including, you know, using some of the OG open source tools to migrate VMs from VMware to OpenStack. And there are some tooling that does allow you to do zero downtime migrations. And we've, you know, managed to get them all work. We managed to break them all. We've managed to figure out how to fix them all. So that is possible in some cases. I would say the second part in terms of having something like SRM, like, you know, ironically enough, for our VMware customers, most of them aren't using SRM, they're using Zerto, which is a very similar design product. And I think, and we actually have several similar types of products we're looking at to offer that same type of feature in OpenStack. And I think, you know, there's obviously gaps like that I would love to see the community address, because you know, there's ways to offer that functionality natively at the OpenStack level to take advantage of the way it works to operate that at a native level. But at the same time, there are third-party tools and partners that we look to work with to bridge a lot of those gaps for people who depend on them.
Got 5 minutes.
Like, as long as I know, except for a very exceptional case, there is no such a migration tool to support the fault tolerance migrations, no downtime. But we can manage like the services downtime, like a zero, by the scheduling the like a migration time is and a notice to users in advance. By this way, we migrated like a 500 like a Bell Matter machines to OpenStack for telecom companies of like IPTV services. They should be running 24 hours, 7 days a week, right? There was no services downtime to migrate 500 physical machines migration to OpenStack.
Are they standalone applications or clustered applications?
Like IPTV, as you know well, like work together, 500 Bell Matter machines, right? We manage it like a services downtime, zero. But you don't need to like look for the like a migration tool which support like fault tolerance. There is no such a tool in the world. And regarding the like a site recovery capability, site recovery is a very fantastic the product. Like they support like almost a fault tolerance the disaster recovery technology, right? Between the VMware and the VMware, right? But I said like OpenStack Z project. Actually, the Z converter it has like a hypervisor or cloud agnostic backup, disaster recovery, and the migration technology. The OpenStack Z project is like an integration the project with our 3 technology that into the OpenStack platform. Actually, we plan to offer the like a disaster recovery technology with some the reasonable price in OpenStack platform. This guide will also provide like a flexible move in and move out capability. Our disaster recovery backup based, but there is no real-time replication capability. But we already have like a like a large enterprise use cases using our disaster recovery. The largest customer is Samsung Electronics, and the largest banking customer. Yeah, OpenStack Z will support many things.
Sorry, I think we are out of time. We have 2 minutes. Time for one more question, maybe? Yep.
Okay, so I've definitely had experience with VMware and mechanics and new to OpenStack. My question to you is, VMware has always had courses to get certified on the product. Mechanics has a central subscription kind of class that makes it easy to use. And for early career system administrators, it's easy to dive into the product. Do you feel that OpenStack is ready for an early career system
I mean, I can answer that partially. We do have the Certified OpenStack Administrator exam. We have a broad training ecosystem with lots of companies supporting it and helping train people to get up to speed. I don't know if you guys have anything to add to that.
I mean, yeah, I would add that we typically have training as a part. I mean, again, like I said earlier, one of our goals is to work with our customers to let them know we're a partner in that migration process or a partner in bringing up OpenStack. And so training and onboarding customers into the product, whether it's, you know, coming from somebody who knows public cloud, like AWS, or someone who knows VMware, or someone who's starting out brand new from day one, you know, there's lots of resources, and we work, you know, we work with not only getting them up to speed with their own infrastructure that we're providing them, but also with the proper you know, certification courses or even other open source or open resources that are available. Because again, that's one of the benefits of something open source like OpenStack is, you know, that a product that's 15 years old. There's a whole lot of YouTube on OpenStack.
Yeah, I also say you can check out openstack.org/marketplace, and you'll see all the training companies and consulting companies that can also help you along your journey, and you'll see both Rackspace and zConverter listed there. And I'm afraid we are out of time. If you have other questions, I guarantee you, well, I don't want to make any promises, but probably Ken and DJ would be happy to answer them outside. And I thank you all for your time.